Class, in this video, we want to review the slope formula, which slope is going to be represented by this equation y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now, what in the world does that mean? Well, let's begin with the letter m. In mathematics, in algebra, we allowed the letter m to represent the slope of a line. And so we can have a positive slope, meaning that going from, say, left to right, the line is going up. Or we can have a negative slope, meaning that if we're going from left to right, it's going to go down. That would be a negative slope. We'll see examples of both. And this slope is going to be represented by the change in y, and that's a little delta sign, means the change in y over the change in x. In other words, what's happening between the two y components and the two x components. And we call this rise over run. That is a phrase you've heard me use in class, and that is a phrase that you'll hear throughout high school math. Rise over run. We're dealing with slope. Now, the question then becomes, what does this y2 and y1, what is this meaning? Well, I want to remind you that the 2 is what we call a subscript, meaning that it has no mathematical value and that it's at the bottom of the letter. It's simply nomenclature. And by that I mean it's naming the y coordinate. So if we were to come over to our first example, let's call this point number 1 and this point number 2. Now you could actually reverse that and call this first point, you could call 3, 2 point number 2 and negative 2, negative 3 point number 1. It does not matter. As a rule of thumb, I typically work from right to left. I said right to left, I meant left to right, and not necessarily the points here, but the way they're written here. I just go from left to right this way. It's just a pattern. But again, you can make this point 2 and this point number 1. No problem. So, according to the way I've numbered it, that means this is my x-coordinate, because we know the first value is always the x-coordinate. That would be x1, and the 2 would be y1. Well, that means the negative 2 is x2, and the negative 3 is y2. So let's substitute, and that's a word I've been using a lot in class this year. It is a very important word to algebra. We are going to substitute 3 into my equation where x1. And so let's rewrite this. We're going to say m is equal to y2, which in this case is negative 3, minus y1, which is 2. And there's the 2 right there. That is this 2. You say, wait, but that's a positive 2. That is correct. But our formula is a negative, and that's going to be very important as you deal with a negative y1. All right, let's go back to filling this in. What about our x2? Well, that's going to be negative 2 minus, what is our x1? It is 3. And so negative 3 minus 2 is a negative 5. Negative 2 minus 3 is also a negative 5. Well, that's a 1, isn't it? That's a 1 slope. So what if we just said 5 over 5? Let's go back to our drawing here, and we start, well, let's just start right there, and let's count up. If we're here, we're going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so we know we're going 5 up. All right, so there is a plus 5. That's my rise. Starting from this point, I'm going to go plus 5. And look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to go 5 to the right. It is a positive slope. And that's how I would draw my line right there. All right, so going from left to right, it's going up. That means it's a positive slope. That means I'm looking for a positive value over here. And so why is it a 1 though? That seems kind of odd, right? It means that I could also go up, and I'll illustrate it right there, up 1 over 1. I could go up 6 over 6, up 8 over 8, because as long as the numerator and the denominator match, I have that positive 1 slope. Let's look at one other example here. I've got negative 3 and 4 right here, and 4 and negative 2. And I've already plotted the dots. So here's 4 and negative 2. Here is, that's negative 3 and 4, and here is 4 and negative 2. Well, let's go back to our formula. And as I've reiterated in class, you must memorize this formula. I will never, ever put this formula on a quiz or a test. You must memorize it. All right, so this is going to be our y2 value, and this is going to be our y1 value, assuming I do my left to right scheme and say the one on the left is number 1 and the one on the right is number 2. That makes the negative 3x1 and it makes the 4x2. So my formula being y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, that's going to be a negative 2 minus 4 over a 4 minus a minus 3. Wow, watch that really close. Did you see what just happened? That x1 is a negative value. I did that on purpose. So it's minus the x1. So it's minus a negative 3. Let's go ahead and rewrite that. We've got to distribute that. That's going to be a negative 6 over 4 plus 3. Remember, there is a 1 right there. So we have to distribute that negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 3 is a positive 3. So my slope, m, is going to be negative 6 over 7. So there's my slope. Wow, that looks strange, doesn't it? Not really. Again, as we've talked about in class, fractions are our friends. Especially when you're dealing with slope, you're going to see a lot of fractions. But that simply means I'm going to drop 6, because that's my rise, but it's negative, so I'm going to drop 6, and I'm going to run 7. All right, so it's rise over run. So let's count this up. Let's start from left to right. And I'm right there, just dealing with my drop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, that's what our numerator right over here was, a negative 6. So I drop 6. It's going to go right there. And let's see if I can somehow. So that's a negative 6. Well, what am I going to run? Well, I'm going to run 7. And if it's positive 7, so technically this is a positive 7. I'm not asking you to write it that way. I simply want you to see it. Then I'm going to go over, let's change our thing here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And there it is. I ran 7. So let's go through here. That's going to be a plus 7. And so there is your line. All right. Now, that makes sense that I'm going from my left to my right, going this direction, my line is going down. If I'm going left to right and my line is going down, that is a negative slope, and that's exactly what I have here. Now, just for kicks, it might be helpful to see this, that we can also start from this point, and what if we said our slope was 6 over negative 7? Well, look, there's really no difference. I'm just applying the negative sign to the different value. So what if I were to rise 6? Well, that means I'm going to start here, and I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so now I've gone plus 6, but the negative here, I have to go to the left, minus 7. But look at that. I'm at the same 2 points regardless. I have the exact same line. Guys, I hope this helps. Review this video, and I'll be providing plenty of sample problems in class.